We've heard much tonight about the central political importance of Ukraine to the impeachment inquiry. But that country's also at war with Russian-backed separatists. It's been 5.5 brutal years of conflict. So how does the political upheaval here echo on the front lines of Europe's only country at war? Special correspondent Simon Ostrovsky went to the front lines to find out.
While the stakes of the bitter political fight being fought over impeachment in Washington may seem high, here, on the outskirts of Donetsk, where Ukraine is fighting an actual shooting war, the stakes are far higher.
The war in Ukraine has dragged on for 5 years, and it's killed more than 13,000 people. It's fought in trenches like this one that stretch for hundreds of kilometers through eastern Ukraine. But it was largely forgotten by the outside world until it became the backdrop for the impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump.
Until Mr. Trump took office, Ukraine enjoyed unwavering bipartisan U.S. support in its conflict with Russia, which invaded and annexed Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula in 2014. The annexation was the biggest land grab in Europe since World War II and sparked a war in eastern Ukraine, where Russia and its separatist allies have taken control of parts of the country's eastern industrial heartland known as the Donbass. Kyiv only barely managed to prevent pro-Russia forces from totally overrunning the country, thanks to the U.S. and its allies, who imposed an economically damaging set of sanctions on Moscow.
We're united in our support for Ukraine. We're united in our determination to isolate Russia and impose costs for Russia's actions.
The threat of further sanctions, if Russia pushed on, have stayed the Kremlin's hand so far. Fast forward to 2019, and several top U.S. officials are alleging that President Trump blocked crucial military aid to the country over the summer to try to get Kyiv to open investigations into his American political rival.
Throughout its campaign against Russia's occupation of lands that are just several hundred yards that way, Ukraine has relied on the United States for both military and diplomatic support. In July, the White House suspended nearly $400 million in aid, causing its Ukrainian allies to question America's resolve.
The aid included night vision scopes like this one and first aid kits, which members of Ukraine's 92nd Separate Mechanized Brigade showed NewsHour. But the scope of the assistance is much wider and seeks to modernize Ukraine's armed forces by providing more capable small arms like new sniper rifles and grenade launchers, radars, vehicles, and tactical communication equipment. It also pays for advisors and high-tech training simulators.
Here, take a look. A flag. Look at the hill behind the lake. It stands out in the light. That's the DNR flag. Might be the Russian flag.
And though the White House eventually did release the aid to Ukraine under concerted congressional pressure in September, the political damage was felt both in Kyiv and here on the front lines. Private Alexei Machonkoladze, who served in Ukraine's army as part of the 92nd Brigade for 3 years, worries that the diplomatic support his country has relied on is disappearing.
Under Obama, they pressured them with sanctions. As soon as something happened, they pushed sanctions. Not anymore. No one is pressuring Russia with sanctions, and Russia was 100% using this situation. Trump has just let Russia off the hook a bit.
The scandal has damaged Ukraine's interests in another way, too. After winning a landslide election with 73% of the vote earlier this year, Ukraine's new president, Volodymyr Zelensky, entered negotiations to de-escalate hostilities with Russia from a position of strength. But as President Trump and an array of associates led by his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, began making political demands of Zelensky's administration, cracks in the U.S.-Ukrainian alliance started becoming apparent.
There is a load of evidence that the Ukrainians created false information.
In his meeting with Zelensky at the United Nations, Trump responded to a question about military aid to Ukraine by telling Zelensky it was up to him to figure it out with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I really hope that you and President Putin get together and can solve your problem. That would be a tremendous achievement.
State television in Russia jumped on the comment, interpreting it as a signal that the U.S. was throwing Ukraine under the bus.
After his triumphant meeting with Donald Trump, in quotes, of course, the Ukrainian president had to lie back and enjoy it. We know what happened in the United States. You have nowhere left to go.
On the front lines, the soldiers of Ukraine's 92nd are skeptical Russia will hold to the terms of any agreement.
Do you think that without the strong support of the United States, Ukraine can get a fair peace deal with Russia?
I think not. No. If, for example, America and Europe don't help, I think Russia will push forward. They won't just occupy this area. It'll be like Crimea. They'll invade.
Zelensky has nevertheless pushed forward with a controversial plan to move troops away from the front lines in certain sectors. The idea is that if soldiers can't see the enemy, they'll be less likely to engage, and casualties will drop. Veteran groups see the plan as capitulation to Russia, and thousands have marched in street protests to oppose it, illustrating the challenges for Zelensky on the domestic front. But the biggest challenge is not only the toll in lives lost, but in lives ruined. Serhiy Shevchenko showed NewsHour how he's reinforced the windows of his home, which were blown out for the 8th time in a recent mortar attack.
It used to be called Forest Street. Now I call it Dead Street. This is the most ruined street in Avdiivka.
Although the U.S. has not contributed any troops to Ukraine in combat roles, it continues to train the Ukrainian military at exercises like this one. Go! Ukraine, on the other hand, has sent its troops to fight and to die in the U.S.-led mission to Iraq. It's something that U.S. Army Colonel David Jordan of the 45th Infantry brought up at a ceremony dedicated to members of Ukraine's 92nd who were undergoing a U.S. training course in 2017.
Like the 45th, the 92nd has served in combat in Iraq. Our shared experiences will help us form a bond of trust.
I asked this member of the 92nd, serving in a trench on the front line, if he felt that that bond of trust had now been broken.
We value the U.S. support and hope that it continues. Whatever happens, we will continue to defend our lands. Our morale is high, so we're not feeling down, and we won't fall, and that's that.
On the front lines in eastern Ukraine, I'm Simon Ostrovsky for the PBS NewsHour.